Welcome to the Writer Reads Mack and Me and Odyssey, Book 2, Mack and Me, Blaedergil's host. Chapter 23, Delight on Deck. What the? Mack started as Pritchard grabbed me, but Pritchard continued with the lift, releasing me in a throw that propelled me into Mack's chest. Mack went down, and Pritchard had drawn a small needler from inside his ship's suit and darted us before we could untangle ourselves. You need Delight on deck, he said. I knew what Mac wanted to say, even though he was in no fit state to say it. Hell, it was exactly the same thing I wanted to say. No fucking way. You need her, Pritchard told us. First, because Odyssey will have all our hides if she's still locked up down here when they get here. And believe me, they are coming. And secondly, because she's been on this station before, and you, he said, addressing me directly, need her with you if you're going to survive going through the ducts. He paused, and we both stared at him. Actually, you're going to need her if you're going to get into the ducts or through the maintenance hatches. Or did you think she'd visited in an official capacity? Now that he mentioned it, I ran the station's security files, trying to match Delight's face to the records they had for visitors. Pritchard tilted his head and shot another glance toward me. 2 years, 2 standard months, 3 days, 4 hours, and 37 minutes ago, to be precise. I followed his time frame and couldn't find a record for anyone matching Delight's description entering the station. Not via the usual route, anyway. What I did find was a small glitch in the security footage, where Delight's face came up as a partial match for a maintenance worker that ducked into a corridor and completely vanished from the scans and from the station records. I wondered how long the stuff in Pritchard's dart would take to wear off, and felt Mac shift beneath me. Well, of course Mac would recover before I did. Of course he would. He has more body mass than you do, Pritchard said, and I finally understood that he was reading my mind and was probably in my implant, along with everybody else. I wondered why I couldn't see him there, and he let his presence become clear. I sighed, feeling my muscles start to tingle as feeling returned. I should be mortified, or outraged, or something, but I just didn't care. I didn't even feel numb. Was it bad that I was starting to accept the chance that I would never have another private thought, ever again? Was it? I sighed, trying to shift my weight off Mac's chest and feeling Mac's hands on my shoulders as he lifted me to one side. Tell me why I shouldn't just put you in the pod beside hers. Pritchard didn't move. He continued to lounge against the door to my room. Because you need both me and Delight on our feet and on your side, he said simply. We've already gone out on quite the limb to keep Cutter here from a breathtakingly short-lived trip amongst the stars, and she's not out of the woods yet. They had, and I wasn't? And why the fuck did they care anyway? Pritchard must have caught all or part of that thought, because he turned his head toward me and finally pushed himself off the doorframe. Because the two of you are not so different, he said, and then turned his attention to Mac. What do you say we get Delight to join our meeting in the cafe, and we get down to business? I stared at him, not quite able to accept what he'd said. Delight and I weren't so different. The hells we weren't. He caught that thought. You'd be surprised, he murmured, but his attention was mostly on Mac and what he might do next. Mac was studying him intently, giving him the sort of stare that a big cat might give a snake it was torn between walking past or smacking. And Pritchard waited, not tense, not relaxed, but somewhere in between. But somewhere between the two, making it clear he'd accept whatever Mac brought, but he wouldn't just lie down and take it. You risked a lot, Mac said, darting me on my own ship. He held out the dart he'd plucked from his side. Cutter will take you to the cafe. I'll fetch Delight. Pritchard nodded, releasing a quietly held breath as he unlocked my door and let Mac move past him and through it. Max stopped as he came alongside the man, and Pritchard tensed. She only gets one chance, Pritchard. She shoots me again, and I will end her. Pritchard went still, his whole body quiet as he studied Mac's face. Probably probing Mac's implant as well, I thought, but Pritchard gave nothing away, and I watched as he moved back from the door and gestured for Mac to go before him. As Mac stepped past, Pritchard looked to me. Are you coming? He asked, and held out his hand. I thought about not taking it, and then decided it would be quicker if I did. How many spare pockets do you have? He asked, helping me to my feet, and I knew he was referring to the suit. A few. Why? Because you're going to need more gear, he told me, and I remembered who would have been riding shotgun when Delight boarded the station. Of course he'd known what she needed. Anything I don't need? I asked, and we both knew I was referring to what I already carried. Pritchard shook his head. Nope. Some you picked, Delight could have done with on the last round. Others addressed the changes I saw in the schematics. But not all of them. No, not all. We'll discuss it with Tens. He let go of my hand and we headed for the door. I wondered just how long it would take Mac to pull Delight out of stasis, and how well she'd take it. She'd been pretty angry the last time we'd met. She'll still be pretty mad, Pritchard told me, but she'll be okay. We came to a cross passage, and Pritchard stopped. Rather than continue toward the calf, I stopped beside him. What? This airlock thing, he said, and I frowned. But he kept going. How much trouble is it going to be? Why? Because the plan's not going to work if you can't move through one without freezing up. I figure I'll be okay as long as I'm going in. Uh-huh. And what if you have to come out? He asked, and I felt a chill run through my chest. I pushed it away and made myself meet his gaze. I'll be fine. He reached out and grabbed my good hand in a grip as tight as iron. Want to test a theory? I tried to pull my hand away. Not right now, I don't. Tens is waiting. The needler appeared so fast I didn't know what to say. I wasn't making a suggestion. I tried again to pull free. I said, not right now, and I punctuated each of the last three words with a movement of my own. Not saw me wrap my metal hand over the muzzle of the needler, pull the weapon from Pritchard's grasp, and throw the weapon away. Right and now accompanied the two punches I threw at his face. The first one connected with his cheek. The second one missed his face and slammed into his shoulder. Cutter! Well, those tones were familiar. Pritchard! Come to think of it, so were those. Leave him alone came out simultaneously with let her go. Well, shit. Pritchard and I turned as one to look toward the voices, and I don't think either of us were surprised to see Mac and Delight hurrying toward us. I guess Mac had taken as long as I thought he would to let her out of her box. We waited until they'd reached us, and that was when I registered that Pritchard was still holding my hand. I tried to yank it out of his grasp, but he refused to let it go. Both Mac and Delight caught the movement and looked at us. What's going on here? Mac asked. Nothing, I said, just as Pritchard answered, she doesn't want to check her ability to cope with airlocks. I shot him a look that promised retribution, but Mac stepped in. Tens is going to be irritated if we let another pot of coffee go cold, he said, stepping between us and laying an arm across my shoulders. It's not something we can replenish on the station. I caught the stubborn set to Pritchard's jaw and watched it soften as Delight laid a hand on his shoulder. Coffee first, she said firmly, and he subsided. I missed whatever passed between them next as Max started toward the cafe, taking me with him. Still causing trouble? He asked, but his tone was light, so I didn't dignify it with an answer. We were met by slow clapping as we entered the cafe, and Tens was standing beside the doorway to Mac's private dining room. It's about time, he said. Case says you need to get your shit together and let her know if you need any fancy flying done on the approach, by which she means you've got about 10 minutes or it won't happen. I looked at Delight and then at Pritchard. You're more familiar with the station approaches, I said. Do we need Case to do any fancy flying? Depends on the berth, Delight said, and Tens highlighted where we'd been assigned to dock. Sweet. In that case, we're good. We'll do a bit of a belly crawl and then come up to the hatch. She turned to me, highlighting the hatch we'd need if we took the furthest lab on the list. Suit you, Cutter? I looked at the map, noted the hatch and storeroom she was suggesting, and looked for anything that might provide an alternative. In the end, it was pretty clear. It'll do, I said, but what if it isn't there? Delight cocked her head and smiled. I was hoping you'd have a suggestion for that, she said, and I wondered what game she was playing. A diplomatic one, she said, and I rolled my eyes. Implant compromised. What the fuck ever? I ran a quick route through the ducts and then patched into the security cams for the outer level. You know what? I said. I think that lab's a red herring. I felt Mack sit up and start paying attention, so I stuck the footage from the three labs side by side. The lab on the inside of the corridor was empty, save for two scientists and a row of pods. The lab opposite it had more pods, but a half dozen more scientists at three different tables running parallel on either side of the pods. The lower lab had a single pod, two scientists working opposite each other at screens set on the desks placed back to back beside it, and nothing like the equipment we'd seen in the other labs. For a lab working on a cure, that one's seriously understaffed, I said. And under-equipped, Pritchard added. At least you're dressed the part, Max said. Those civvies will blend right in if you decide to take the elevator up and use the corridors. He had a point. Corridors and elevator would be quicker than returning for an EVA to the hatch we'd identified as the closest access point to the upper labs, and they'd be much, much quicker than using the ventilation shafts. Safer too, Delight concurred, and I wondered why she said that. I found out when she took us on a run through her previous experience in the ducts. That has to be illegal. Not on Kostral. But it's a space station. Someone could get hurt. I think that's the general idea. What happens to the maintenance workers? They have remotes to turn it off. And what if they don't work? They only lose one or two a year. I stared at the visual she'd provided and could understand why. If I saw one of those things coming at me through the ducts, I might forget how to use the remote too, or maybe drop the damn thing out of sheer fright. And that was in addition to the movement sensors, heat sensors, laser points, and gas traps. In fact, I was real glad Delight was coming along to take point in the vents. I should be making you go first as a training exercise, she said, and looked toward Mac as he shifted his weight in his chair. But Mac says I'm better equipped and he'd like me to prove why he was bothering to keep me around. That last was delivered with a twist of the mouth that made it look like she'd eaten something sour, and I wondered what else Mac had said to gain the admission. You don't want to know, came softly into my head, and I couldn't help but glance at him. Tens was smirking again, which I'm pretty sure wasn't helping the situation any, and I tried real hard to keep that thought to myself. I was going to be relying on Delight to keep me alive, and I really didn't want her any more pissed off with me than she already was. Good luck with that. Tens again, and I glared at him. We going yet? I asked. Mac leaned back in his seat and sipped his coffee, but his eyes had that faraway look that said he was talking to Case. At least, that's what I thought he was doing. I couldn't hear a thing, and for a moment I envied him the privacy. He must have caught the edge of my thoughts because his eyes flickered in my direction, but he didn't say a word to address it. Whatever he thought about the situation he'd put me in, he wasn't sharing. Delight watched the exchange from beside me, but was equally quiet. And Pritchard? Pritchard just sat back sipping the tea he'd ordered and keeping an eye on us all. You would have thought he was the only responsible adult in the room. And raised eyebrows at that thought didn't win him any brownie points either. They meant he was still reading me through my implant, and I still didn't appreciate it. Whatever. I waited for Mac's verdict. Case says we dock in 10. Delight slapped me on the shoulder and stood up. Time to go, kiddo, she said, and headed for the door. She glanced back at Pritchard, but he just raised his cup in her general direction like he was making a toast and didn't budge an inch. Delight hesitated, but he ignored her, closing his eyes to better appreciate his next sip of tea. So she rolled her eyes and stamped her way out the door. I didn't bother looking at any of them as I followed. It wouldn't make any difference, and Delight wouldn't appreciate the delay. Darn tootin', she muttered, as she hurried down the corridors to her quarters. I didn't wait for an invitation, but followed her inside, not even flinching when she closed the door behind us. You got everything? She asked, and I named 6 items Pritchard had suggested that I didn't have. She flounced over to the drawers beneath her wardrobe and pulled them out. And I so wasn't going to tell Mack what she was keeping in there. Delight gave the briefest of grins as she caught that thought, but she didn't slow down. She pulled out a bodysuit and a similar set of civilian clothes to the ones I had chosen. Good choice, by the way, she said, dragging out a combat suit that might have been the twin of mine. What? She said. Mac didn't give me time to prep for the meeting, so I've got to do it now. I didn't say anything, but wondered exactly how late she'd been planning on leaving it. She didn't bother answering that, but stripped down and started pulling the body sock on. Armor, she said. If I'm going point, I might need it. I nodded, trying to look anywhere else but at her. She ignored my discomfort and kept going, making small talk as she went. You should get Mac to get you some. Kind of missions he sends you on, you need it. I wondered why she cared, but I agreed. Between the little trip into Ghoul's catacombs and the last run to Kostrel, body armor sounded like a nice addition. And a parachute. Yeah, after that last jaunt off the roof of Blaedergil's mansion, a parachute would do just fine. Who knows how many other heights I was going to be leaping off in the hopes Ten and his team could catch me. Chute would get in the way of the grab and be a pain in the ass when they brought you on board, she said, not to mention make you easier to find for the hostiles. As opposed to being a splat mark on the sidewalk, I wondered, but I didn't say it. Delight had moved to being dressed and was now stowing her gear in the pockets and pouches on her suit. Those EVA suits are going to be a bitch to retrieve, she said, and she raised it like she was talking about the weather. Small talk, right? But she had a point. I'll mention it to Mac, I said. How do you think he'll feel about losing them? Delight asked, and I stared at her. She held up a vial that held a coalescing swarm of grey. Nanites, she said, dust chompers. Short-lived, but effective. We sprinkle enough of them on the suits once we're out of them, and no one will be able to tell where they came from. Keeps Mac and the ship in the clear. I turned the idea over in my head, weighing the chance of Mac being able to retrieve the suits against the risk they posed if they were traced back to the Shady Marie. I knew scrapping the suits would be the best option, but they weren't mine to scrap, and I really didn't have time to check with Mac. I was just about to tell her to go ahead when Mac intervened. Nan them, came from Mac, and I wasn't too pleased to realize him and Tens were still inside my head. What? You thought we'd leave you alone with her? Tens wanted to know, and Delight pouted. They don't leave you alone for a second, do they? I shrugged. Would you? She cracked another short-lived smile. Not in a million years, short stuff. Come on. Time we went.